All righty, guys. Welcome to Crypto Philosophers number 9. I'm Shadi. We're going to talk about Aave today. Let's get into it. Okay, so what is Aave? Aave is a decentralized, non-custodial liquidity market protocol where users can participate as depositors or borrowers. So it is a lending protocol. And it is an over-collateralized lending protocol in particular. So we can read through some of the main points here. Depositors can provide liquidity to the market to earn passive income. So I'll deposit something like ETH or wrapped BTC or any one of or stable coins, and people can borrow it and put down collateral, and then I'll get some yield and they'll pay some interest. And so borrowers are able to borrow in an over-collateralized fashion, or they can take out a flash loan, which we'll talk about later, and this is under collateralized. So they'll get sort of a loan for one block. We can talk about exactly what that means soon. And so it was launched in 2017 during the so-called, I think Aave's launch sort of represented the beginning of the so-called DeFi summer, which actually wasn't 2017. When was the DeFi summer called, do you know?
Yeah, I'm not positive. I want to say it was like 2020 or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like it was 2020. And so, but Aave was big in the DeFi summer. They launched earlier than that. But now total liquidity of Aave protocol across all the different chains it's deployed on is close to $20 billion. And so the way that it works is, basically in a lending market, all of the collateral and all of the assets that you can borrow are kind of pulled together so that every lender earns the same variable rate and every borrower pays the same variable rate. And so let's see if we can move forward. All right. So how does Aave work? So one is all loans are over collateralized in a collateral asset different from the one being borrowed. So for example, I can borrow DAI by putting up ETH as collateral, normally more than the value of the DAI that I'm going to borrow. So like 150% of the DAI that I want to borrow, I need to put that up in ETH, then I can borrow DAI. And so there's also for each particular bit of particular asset that I can use to collateralize my debt position, there is a collateralization ratio, which is basically how much of the value of my loan I need to have in collateral before I'm liquidated. So like what's the minimum amount of collateral that I can have against my loan? And similar to the process that liquidations happen in MakerDAO vaults, there are these keepers who kind of have an incentive to go and liquidate under collateralized debt positions. And so they get this bonus incentive for each unit of debt they close out. It should be similar, it should be familiar because sort of MakerDAO has this kind of over collateralized loan sort of setup that we talked about in a previous episode of Crypto Philosophers. And also Abracadabra also does something kind of similar, which we also covered in a previous session. Any questions so far?
It sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Okay. Great. Okay. So one thing I noticed is, so Aave is like, they're really big on the whole decentralization thing, right? And so, all sorts of DeFi protocols like to call themselves decentralized and hype up how decentralized they are. Aave really is trying to put its effort in where its mouth is here. And so interesting thing is that their front end is actually hosted on IPFS. So their front end is also decentralized, like it's not hosted on centralized servers anywhere. So when you go to aave.com and read the docs, you can, you're on aave.com, but when then you click on launch the app, you get this notice, which is like, oh, you're no longer on aave.com. You're going to a third-party independent website, which is community deployed and maintained on IPFS. And so it's really trying to give you that sense that Aave's front end is decentralized, and just like the smart contracts are run on a decentralized blockchain. So that was cool because that's not something that, for example, the DeFi protocol that I work on does yet. Our front end is basically closed source.
Yeah. Do you think they're doing that for like regulatory reasons to avoid like regulatory consequences, or do you think it's more just for like the ethos of being decentralized?
That's a good question. I mean, if it is the case that, really the answer is I don't know, but if it is, I know that they're really into the ethos of decentralization, but if it is the case that they get some sort of like regulatory, like some sort of like security on the regulatory side, or like freedom from liability by decentralizing their front end, then I'm sure that's part of the consideration, but I actually don't know.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. Okay, so then let's talk about some of the different, so how the collateralization on Aave works, some of the different assets you can deposit as collateral, and what the collateralization ratio is. So first of all, you can look at the screenshot of Aave that I took here. And if you're looking at a particular asset here, this is just the bottom half, the top half is kind of cut off. Look at a particular asset listed that can be deposited as collateral on Aave. It gives you the LTV, the liquidation threshold, and the liquidation penalty. And so in this case, we're looking at USD, and the maximum LTV ratio represents the maximum borrowing power of a specific collateral. So in this case, you can deposit $100 of TUSD, and you can borrow $80 worth of some other asset, backed by this TUSD collateral. And if TUSD was to depeg and be at less than 82.5% of its value, then you could be liquidated. And liquidation penalty is 5%, and that's what the keeper gets for liquidating your position. Does that make sense, or is that consistent with how you guys understand this setup?
Yeah.
That's good.
Shadi,
Yep.
can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Just a bit unclear at the high level. I'm missing something here. Why do you want to put up 1 ETH to get 0.75 ETH? Or this idea of over collateralization in general, how does it make your money go further?
That is a great question. Okay, so why put up? It's very capital inefficient, right? Ian, it's like, why do I want to put up more money to borrow basically less money? And one thing is, say it again.
I said, and you have to pay interest on it.
Exactly, and I have to pay interest on it. So there are a lot of use cases for this. One is, for example, let's just say I don't want to spend my ETH, right? Let's say I want to take a loan out against my ETH. I'm holding ETH for the long term. I believe that ETH is going to go up in value a lot over the next 5 years, and I want to I need some liquidity, like I need some USDC or DAI to do something in DeFi with, or to buy a Maserati with, or something like that. Well, I can take out a loan against my ETH, and I can actually use my ETH for something instead of just having it sit there and hold it. Is that an okay answer?
You can use your ETH without spending it.
Exactly. So that's one reason that I would be willing to accept something like this.
Basically, is to keep your exposure to ETH. Like if you think ETH is going to keep going up, you don't want to sell it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So that's one simple answer, but you'll see there are a lot of, hopefully I'll show that there are a number of good use cases for Aave. Okay, so let's go on from that. So one note here is that volatile assets have lower max LTV ratios because, for example, ETH, because a price movement could make it such that the value of this collateral could drop precipitously, and then your debt position would be under collateralized. So you can take out less money against let's say $100 worth of ETH than $100 worth of well, actually, no. In this case, ETH has the highest collateralization ratio.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising that it's that.
That is pretty surprising. We might have to investigate that.
Compared to TUSD, they're like, oh, ETH is more Bitcoin than TUSD.
Yeah, that is funny. So ETH is seen as somehow more stable than TUSD, but okay, less stable, and more stable than WBTC, probably less stable than USDC. Although I didn't put that number up here. All right. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of what the Aave app looks like. And here you can see, this is the Ethereum market. So this is the Aave protocol launched on Ethereum. These are the different assets you can supply and borrow. And for example, BUSD, the BUSD has, let's see, 17.45 million supplied and 13 million borrowed. And the APY you pay for borrowing at the time of the screenshot is 3.79%. Okay. Now, one interesting.
Can you go back real quick?
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, it's in the supply APY column. There's like for Binance, for example, there's that 2.53% number. You see
Yeah,
that?
for Binance, there's 2.53. Yep.
And then below that, there's a 0.59%.
Yeah, I think that is and you're curious what that is, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm guessing it's like Aave doing some bit like incentives supply, basically, where they pay you with Aave tokens.
Yeah, I think it is like boosted with Aave tokens is the idea. But we can just go look at it right now and double check. That's honestly worth knowing about. So we can go to Aave. You guys can see this, right?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, so we're gonna go to
it's
decentralized.
IPFS.
All right, we're on IPFS. This is decentralized, community maintained. Let's check this out. Okay, so then we can expand this here. And we'll go to the Ethereum market. And whoa, right now, it's gone.
Where did it go?
Damn, that is actually really interesting. So I don't know why it's gone. That's actually very curious. But I think that was saying like, it's like, with the liquidity mining or whatever incentive, it's boosted and you'll get that extra APY because you'll get some Aave tokens. Maybe they can't afford that anymore. Yeah, that's right. Okay, it's tough times for everyone.
Yeah, Ian was telling me he got burned on Aave a little bit, the Aave coin.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Still hot.
Yeah, I know that. I definitely know that feeling, and I'm still hodling as well, just not Aave. So let's go back to the slideshow. Okay, so one other thing that Aave did this is about a year ago, which is they launched an AMM market where you can actually lock up liquidity provider tokens, right? And so to review, liquidity provider tokens that you get from an automated market maker like Uniswap represents your ownership in a liquidity pool. So you deposit assets in a liquidity pool, and then you get some LP tokens that represent your ownership in that liquidity pool. And then what can you do with those LP tokens? You can actually use them as collateral on Aave to take out an over-collateralized loan, which is pretty cool. Does this remind you of any protocol that we have looked at before?
I want to say like Rari Fuse.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Had that.
Exactly. Also, Abracadabra had that. The very first protocol we talked about, Abracadabra was all about you can use yield-bearing tokens as collateral to take out loans. So this is also something that that Aave offers, and that was a pretty cool thing when it came out. Now, one thing I don't actually get. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say in this screenshot, it looks like the supply APY is like 0% for the LP token stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing I don't get. So we can go back. Let's see. We hit escape and let's go look at Aave. So I don't actually get what's up with this. Like, it was kind of a big deal when they launched this because I think they're the first place where you could deposit LP tokens from some place like Uniswap and then take out a loan against it. But what the heck is this? Like, I don't actually know what to make of. What does this even mean here? So there are none of these tokens, these LP tokens here deposited.
Yeah.
And then this stuff, I don't know if this has anything to do with LP tokens, right? It seems like it doesn't. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But it's a very, very small market size. So maybe they're not doing it anymore, but I couldn't find anyone saying like, oh, okay, we're not really doing this Ethereum AMM assets market thing anymore. Obviously, you can still deposit. So any ideas? Or because I don't really know either.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But yeah, I guess at one point it was big, and then I guess Abracadabra and Fuse took their money or something. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, well, that was kind of a cool thing. And I think Aave was probably first. Oop, not going to share it. It's the slideshow. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so here's one important thing that Aave provides, and I think Aave was the first protocol to provide this particular functionality, and it is actually kind of a big deal. It's one of those things that, you know, sometimes it feels like crypto and DeFi is reinventing the wheel, or like just rebuilding TradFi on a more expensive kind of blockchain. But actually here, flash loans really are something that don't exist at all in TradFi. It's very cool, very interesting, very technical, and very useful. And so, has anyone here heard of flash loans?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I don't have like a deep understanding for how they work technically.
Okay, so we will go look into them, and here are flash loans. So let us, basically, you can borrow some money for very cheap, right? Theoretically, you should be able to borrow it for free, because you can borrow it not only for very cheap, but also completely uncollateralized. The only thing is you have to repay the loan within the same transaction. Okay, so how does that work? So basically, like, first of all, this is a thing only for, let's go forward. This is a thing only for developers, because you need to write some code that basically, you know, you would call the take out a flash loan function on, say, the Aave protocol smart contract. Then they would give you some funds. And this is just like literally like the next, like, you know, bytecode instruction being executed on the Ethereum virtual machine, or whatever blockchain it's running on. So they would transfer this money to you. You would do whatever the heck you want with that money. And then you have to transfer those funds back to Aave. And then Aave would check that, okay, are those funds have they actually been returned? And if if they haven't been returned, then either like they would check that the funds have been returned plus the fee has been paid in Aave's case, because they charge a fee for this flash loan. And if you somehow did not actually return those funds, then the transaction would revert. And just like how, you know, transactions reverting work in any case on the blockchain, when a transaction reverts, everything, all the changes that were made within that transaction are kind of rolled back, and the blockchain is rolled back to the state it was in before you began the transaction. You still do lose the gas that you paid to execute the transaction. And basically, it's as if it never happened. This whole flash loan never happened. So do you have any questions about the high level idea of how flash loan works?
Yeah, what is the upside to be gained within a block? So you have to return it in the same block. What are people doing in this block that yields a profit?
That's a great question. So, you know, the one classic example is arbitrage, right? Let's say that something happens to be cheaper on one exchange than on another exchange, right? Let's say that, like, you know, some particular asset is cheaper on one exchange than the other, right? So you would buy it for cheap. You would take out a flash loan from Aave, buy it for cheap on the first exchange, sell it for more on the second exchange, right? And then repay your flash loan. Wait, is that how we would do it?
And you can do that all in one block. Yeah, that's what I didn't realize you could do it all in a block. The whole arbitrage play.
Yes, you could do that in one block. You could do that in one block.
That makes sense then.
Yeah, so that can be done in one block, because imagine that the thing is, these have to be decentralized exchanges. I mean, that's a very good question. Yes, they have to be decentralized exchanges. Like, they have to be things like Uniswap or Curve that are actually deployed to the blockchain. So that you could interact with them programmatically, just like you can interact with any smart contract programmatically. You cannot take out a flash on Aave and go buy something on Binance, because Binance is a centralized exchange that's like, they're not actually, you call a function on Binance like on the blockchain. This is my understanding of how it works. Is that consistent with your guys' understanding?
Yeah, that's how I say it too. Like, basically, you're not restricted. Like, you can do as much as you want within a single block. The only thing you're limited by is gas consumption, and you can only interact with things that are on the blockchain. So, like what Shadi was saying, you can't do arbitrage through centralized exchanges with flash loans, but like anything on the blockchain, you can do a whole bunch of stuff in one block, basically.
Okay, and so you get all this zero collateral liquidity because since you have to return them the same, there's no risk to Aave. There's no risk that you can just lose all your money because it's all on the block. So they're like, yeah, just take it. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly,
the,
exactly.
The,
Go
the
ahead.
other thing that I commonly see flash loans used for is for like protocol exploits. Or like sometimes there's some exploit that you can do that requires like $100 million to pull it off.
Okay.
And people don't have $100 million, but they'll take a $100 million flash loan and then exploit the protocol in some edge case where that wasn't expected.
Yeah.
And so that's one like of the ways flash loans are seen in a negative light, is that they enable a lot of these, a lot of smart contract exploits were only possible because of flash loans, basically.
I see. Well,
Exactly. Exactly, that's completely right. So we're going to talk about that, and that's kind of the most interesting from a developer's perspective or someone interested in security. Like flash loans really open up all kinds of new attacks, because literally, sometimes you might need a lot of funds to do a particular kind of attack. For example, a governance attack, and now that flash loans exist, you have access to that liquidity. So let us continue. However, there are legit use cases for flash loans, which we're going to talk about now. Before I prepare this presentation, I didn't really know any sort of legit reasons you would use a flash loan, except for doing arbitrage and hacking something, which is not legit, right? But actually, I learned a pretty cool one. And let's just go over whatever is written here. What do we have here? So a flash loan allows you to borrow any available amount of assets without putting up collateral, right? Liquidity needs to be returned within one block. And so how do you take out a flash loan? Well, you have to actually write a smart contract that requests a flash loan. So it's called get flash loan on the Aave, Aave Protocol smart contract. And then your contract can do what it wants with those funds. And then it must pay back the loan plus interest and the fees all within the same transaction. Boom. Let's see. So Aave supports flash loans in all of its markets, and for many smaller cap tokens, this is only the one source of flash liquidity that you can get anywhere is on Aave. Now, here is a legit flash loan use case, and it is refinancing a debt position, similar to refinancing a mortgage, right? So you can use a flash loan to migrate a levered position from one lending platform to another in a single transaction. This is kind of similar to you take out a mortgage at 6%, then interest rates decline, and now you can see that the rates on 30-year mortgages are 4%. Well, you want to pay back, somehow, right? Pay back your whole mortgage to this lender who lent you at 6%, and take out this mortgage again at 4%. This is a thing that people do. You kind of have to pay at least a couple $1,000s for this service, with flash loans, though, maybe you're getting an idea of how flash loans can make this really easy and much cheaper. So let's take a look at that. So Amy's not here, but I used Amy for this example, and it's Amy refinances her levered position. So now this is going to be, here's the setup, right? So assume Compound. Compound is another lending protocol similar to Aave, and let's say Compound, the borrow interest rate in DAI is 15%. Right, pretty expensive. Now assume 1 ETH is equal to 200 DAI in this case. Now, Amy supplies 100 ETH, which is $20,000 in value, and borrows 10,000 DAI on Compound, so half of that, at a 15% interest rate. So then she uses this 10,000 DAI to buy an additional 50 ETH and deposits the 50 ETH back into Compound. So now she has this levered position, so she's increased her exposure to ETH. So now she has deposited 150 ETH as collateral. She has an outstanding loan of 10,000 DAI at 15%. Are we good with the setup so far? Do you have any questions about it? Sorry?
Yeah, I'm following so far. Yeah.
Okay, good. And then now suppose the interest rate is only 5% on Aave, and her goal is to refinance this loan basically and take advantage of the lower rate for DAI on Aave. So this is similar to refinancing a mortgage. How could you do it with a flash loan? Anyone have any ideas before we look at how it works?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like take out a flash loan, pay off your debt, move your loan to a different platform, take out debt again, and then pay off the flash loan.
Boom, exactly. You nailed it. Now the question is, if flash loans don't exist, how would you do this whole thing? Like how would you refinance this loan? Let's say flash loans don't exist.
I mean, she'd have to do the reverse process that she did when she took out the loan.
Exactly. And would that be better or worse than using a flash loan?
Yeah, it's not immediately clear to me why it would be worse.
Yeah, why would it be worse? Well, I guess the real reason is there are exchange fees that you need to basically, let's go look at it right now. So here's how she would do it manually, which is what Cole just described. So she would manually unwind both trades on Compound and then redo them on Aave. So she'd withdraw her 50 ETH from Compound, swap the 50 ETH for 10,000 DAI on Uniswap or something, and pay the swap fee. The whole thing is it's all about the swap fee here, right? You repay the 10,000 DAI loan to Compound, withdraw the original 100 ETH, which you used as collateral, right? Then you deposit into Aave, take a loan for 100 DAI, swap the for 10,000 DAI, swap the 10,000 DAI for 50 ETH, pay a swap fee there, and then the deposit 50 ETH back into Aave. So you're paying 2 swap fees in order to refinance this loan. So you just have to pay the fees on swapping these assets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. One other thing I'm thinking is, like, if she deposited 50 ETH and took out a 10,000 DAI loan, and then she like used the 10,000 DAI to buy like a boat or something, then at that point she would actually be like incapable of refinancing, because she wouldn't be able to do the reverse process without selling her boat anyways.
Exactly.
But then I can see how you would, yeah, the flash loan would let you still refinance even if you don't even have the funds on chain.
Right, exactly. So if you can't quickly swap your boat for DAI, then it'll be hard to repay that loan.
Refinance your loan and then buy the boat again. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah, exactly. So if you use a flash loan, here's how you do it. You take out a flash loan for 10,000 DAI from Aave. You just repay that 10,000 DAI loan on Compound. You withdraw your full 150 ETH from Compound because you have no outstanding debt there. And then you just trigger a normal borrow position on Aave for 10,000 DAI at 5%. And so now you have 150 ETH as collateral. You have an outstanding loan of 10,000 DAI at 5%. So if you look back at that highlighted thing, in the setup, she had a 150 ETH as collateral and an outstanding loan of 10,000 DAI at 15%. So if we go back over here, oops, damn. Yeah, she kind of has the same setup here now on Aave, but it's just cheaper. 150 ETH as collateral, 10,000 DAI, 5%. So she skipped those steps of swapping ETH for DAI to unwind the leverage on Compound and swapping DAI for ETH to rewind the leverage on Aave. And there you go. So that's a legit use of a flash loan. But let's talk about non-legit uses. Let's see, how are we doing on time here? We're doing all right. So okay. Now here's just a list of things that we won't go into, but a list of things from the Aave white paper on stuff you can do with flash loans. Collateral trading, changing the exposure from one or multiple collaterals to another without the need to close debt positions. Repaying a loan with the collateral, so use the collateral deposited in the protocol to repay a debt position. Margin trading, so you can create margin positions used for trading later on. A debt swap, changing the debt exposure from one asset to another. Margin deposits. I don't exactly know what all these things are. This is just to give you an idea of, from the Aave white paper, some of the things that they say you can do with flash loans on the Aave protocol. Boom, let's move forward. Okay, so Aave also has this other thing which they offer, stable rate loans, right? So basically you can take out a loan at a fixed rate, right? And you can have a slightly higher rate or sometimes a much higher rate than the variable rate, which you would pay on your loan. And this is a good thing because you just have a little bit more assurance that your rate is not going to skyrocket. And we won't get into it because there's a lot more to talk about. But that's generally that's a thing that you'll see on Aave. So if we go all the way back, there is you can see here, if you want to borrow DAI, The variable APY at this moment would be 3.54%. The stable APY is 12.46%.
That's a big difference.
It's a big difference, yeah. And I don't exactly know how it's calculated, but this is kind of a thing that, let's say, more risk-averse people, borrowers might want. So, okay. So let us move on. There's also this thing called credit delegation, which is quite cool. But I think for now we're going to skip over it unless we have time. Basically, the idea is that I can deposit collateral. Actually, since I'm talking about it, I might as well go into it. We'll spend a few minutes on it. So this is a really cool thing, which is it's called credit delegation, and it allows a depositor to deposit funds in Aave to earn interest, and then you delegate the borrowing power to somebody else. This is not something I knew about Aave before I did research for this particular talk here, and it was pretty cool when I found out about it. So for example, let's just skip to the example real quick. Well, let's look at the benefits. So the supplier or the delegator, right, can earn extra yield on their deposit. On top of the yield they already earned from the protocol. So I deposit, let's say 10 ETH, and then I delegate my borrowing power to someone else, and they can take out an uncollateralized loan from their perspective against my collateral. I have to trust them though, and I'll charge them something extra on top of what I get from Aave for that service. And then the borrower, of course, you get access to an uncollateralized loan. Does that kind of make sense? What this credit delegation is? I delegate the borrowing power generated by my collateral to somebody else. I can do that through Aave.
Yeah, to me, it kind of makes sense. I'll have to think more about it, but it seems cool. I guess I'm trying to understand the flow where it's like they're depositing funds to earn interest, but when you deposit funds to earn interest, you don't normally have any borrowing power. So I guess it's not clear to me what that borrowing power is.
That's a good question. So when you deposit funds and don't borrow against them, then you can earn interest. Are we good on that? Or are we in agreement on that? And so in this case, you're depositing funds. Let's see if we can work that out in the example here. Let's see if that question sort of gets resolved. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So in this example, Amy gives James an uncollateralized loan. So Amy has 40,000 a DAI in Aave earning interest. James wants to borrow 100 ETH, which is $20,000 in value, to do something profitable without depositing any collateral. So Amy trusts James, done business with him in the past. So then Amy can call this function basically via Aave, the approved delegation function, and will pass James's address as the delegatee and 100 ETH as the amount. And then James will just agree to repay the loan at the Aave borrow rate plus an agreed upon interest payment to Amy. So Amy takes on the risk of this unsecured loan. She gets extra yield on her DAI on top of the Aave supply rate. And that is let's see, we can just talk about, so 2 points on what a credit delegation gets us. So the terms can be mediated by a smart contract. So for example, the repayment flow can happen through a smart contract written by Amy, and this can enforce that the repayment includes the Aave supply rate plus her agreed upon interest rate with James. So this is starting to answer your question, Cole, which is like, basically, James is the borrower, Amy is the supplier of the collateral, and James needs to repay the interest that basically Aave charges on any loan in this market, plus whatever extra Amy is charging him for the service of providing him collateral for an uncollateralized loan from his perspective. The other point here is that delegated liquidity can be given to a smart contract, and then that smart contract can use the liquidity to do something, to accomplish its intended function. Kind of like the way receiving funds from a flash loan is done by a smart contract, and the smart contract goes and does stuff with those funds. So Amy can explicitly delegate the liquidity to the address of James's do arbitrage using ETH contract, and then that contract can actually have the repayment flow along with the fees and everything kind of written in the code. So do you have any questions about this?
Yeah, it looks good. I think I just need to spend more time thinking about it, but yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
This seems like market efficiency play, where
Yeah.
if Amy or whoever knows someone is trustworthy, creditworthy, but the market at large doesn't know, then they can just step in and earn some yield. And that's it. They could earn some yield by taking on the risk themselves, but they're more qualified than Ave to take on that risk for a specific individual.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. So
your parents sign your credit card or whatever.
Yeah.
A secured credit card. They're like, we'll take on the risk of this 12-year-old spending $1,000, whatever it is.
All right.
Exactly. So some larger institution or whatever wouldn't know that James is a creditworthy borrower in this case, but Amy does, and Ave allows her to take advantage of that and charge James something to take out a loan against her collateral. That's a good point. And let's see what else there is to talk about here. Okay, so then we have a big list of the problems that Ave solves in TradFi, and this is kind of like a laundry list of different. So a lot of these examples come from this book called The Future of Finance: DeFi or something like that, and they go through a lot of different protocols, and then they list out a bunch of TradFi problems. Right, in this case, we have limited access. These are things you're probably familiar with: inefficiency, lack of interoperability, opacity, centralized control, right? And then they talk about the ways that these different DeFi protocols solve those problems. So let's just go over them. So one is centralized control. Borrowing and lending rates are controlled by institutions typically. In this case, Ave interest rates are controlled algorithmically through the supply of funds, the demand for borrowed funds. What's another TradFi problem? Limited access. Only select groups have access to these large quantities of money for arbitrage or refinancing. But flash loans make it so that anyone can get liquidity immediately. Lack of interoperability. So you cannot monetize or use excess collateral in a lending position in TradFi, but credit delegation allows parties to use their deposit collateral when they don't need borrowing liquidity. So they can use that collateral and generate extra return on it when they don't need to borrow against it. One problem with TradFi is opacity. So here the problem is stated as unclear collateralization of lending institutions. So you don't know what the collateral, backing up loans and lending institutions is, but there's transparent collateralization ratios of borrowers that everyone can see on Ave. We were just taking a look at that. Okay, so that's kind of like the propaganda side of why Ave is like, a good alternative, why DeFi is kind of, this particular piece of the DeFi ecosystem is a good alternative for some TradFi solutions to the lending problem. Now, how is everyone doing? Can everyone still hear me is one question, because there was like some background noise that was going on, and then it stopped. So I'm wondering if people can still hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you good. I just have a quick question. What was you said there was a book? Was it a book or a post which discusses the limitations of TradFi?
Yeah, so it's a book. It's in the sources here. I can skip to the very end. Let's go to the very end, and it's this one. Harvey Ramachandran and Joey Santoro. You're probably familiar with that name. He's all over Twitter. Yeah. He's the guy behind Faye, and it's called DeFi and the Future of Finance. And it's very, the future of finance has become a joke. So like the cover just says like DeFi and the Future of Finance, like a serif font, and it looks very funny just at first glance. But it's actually a great book. It's like one of the best, kind of, call it semi-comprehensive at the time, and very coherent resources on different DeFi protocols.
All right,
I recommend it. Okay, so now there's this thing called Ave V3, and it was released a couple months ago. And so they provide a lot of interesting enhancements with respect to capital efficiency, protocol safety, decentralization, user experience. Maybe I can save this for another talk though, because there are different things like they reuse their idle. You can reuse idle capital on Ave V3. You have this thing called E mode, which allows you to actually have higher collateralization ratios. If, for example, if you're putting up stable coins as collateral to borrow other stable coins, like you shouldn't have you should have something better than like an 80% collateralization ratio, because the price of these stablecoins, if they're all like, if it's TUSD you're putting up to borrow USDC or something like that, or borrow DAI, the price of these is highly correlated. It's all basically at $1. The DPEG is unlikely, it's the way they see it. And so you should get something like 99% or 97% collateralization ratio rather than 80%. So similarly for ETH and like ETH derivatives, right? Like for example, the staked ETH, you should be able to put up staked ETH to borrow ETH and have a high collateralization ratio, because if the value of staked ETH goes down, which is collateral backing your ETH loan, then the value of your ETH loan goes down. So you don't have to worry too much about having an extra high collateralization ratio or an extra low collateralization ratio to give you that buffer zone in case the value of your collateral goes down. That's a high level view of what this E mode introduces. You can just get better collateralization ratios for assets of the same kind of class, like stable coins or like ETH and ETH derivatives, or like BTC and BTC derivatives. So there's that. Here's an example for E mode, blah, 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 some other stuff. There's something called isolation mode, which allows like, you can start to introduce riskier assets. Previously, it was very kind of strict about what assets are allowed on Aave as collateral, because introduce a bad collateral asset. Let's say I can put up my bad collateral asset, which is going to go to zero tomorrow, and then I can borrow anything. I can borrow DAI, I can borrow USDC, I can borrow ETH, anything in the Aave ecosystem. But they came up with a way for allowing it such that you can introduce riskier or kind of unknown or unvetted assets in an isolated way that won't have negative effects on the whole ecosystem if something bad happens. So that's isolation mode. Won't go into it right now. Let's move on to the bonus, which is flash loan attacks. And this is what Cole said. Flash loans have been used on all kinds of fancy and really epic DeFi hacks. And so we're going to look at a few of them, and then we're going to try our hand at one, and we'll see how it goes. Any questions so far, or any comments that anyone wants to make? All right.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm excited for the. I'll definitely have to look closer at the slides afterwards, because it looks like there's a lot of cool stuff. But yeah, I'm ready for the flash loan attacks.
All right, let's chat about it. So here, what have we got? So here's one flash loan attack. This is just from some headline here. So there's this Beanstalk cryptocurrency project that it was robbed after the hacker voted to send themselves 182 million. So a lot of these DeFi protocols are governed by sort of decentralized governance, where people hold governance tokens, like different members of the community who participate in the protocol hold governance tokens, and then you can vote on different proposals, which is like, okay, let's like put our idle capital into this place in order to generate yield, or let's like raise protocol fees to this much. And then, people put forth proposals on chain, and then people vote proportionally to the amount of governance tokens they hold. And then it's sort of like a majority rules kind of thing, where majority means those voters, like, it's like the people who hold the majority of the governance token kind of get their way in this particular vote. So, but here's the thing, like, let's say you can use flash loans to somehow exploit this, and you yourself can get the majority of governance tokens for a block, and then put forth some kind of proposal that like this, like, transfer all the funds to me or something, and then somehow it passes through some flaw in the governance system. Then flash loans really enable you to kind of screw all these DeFi protocols through governance attacks. So let's read a little bit of what happened here. The attacker used a flash loan to obtain a controlling stake in the project. Security firm Certicay, the Beanstalk attacker, security firm Certicay said the Beanstalk attacker used a flash loan obtained through Aave to borrow close to $1 billion, and he exchanged these for enough beans, which is like the Beanstalk governance token, to gain a 67% voting stake in the project. So with a supermajority stake, they were able to approve the execution of code that transferred the assets to their own wallet. So the attacker then instantly repaid the flash loan, netting an $80 million profit. So that's kind of thing you get with flash loan attacks, especially governance style flash loan attacks.
Yeah.
What else have we got? So we have two more examples here, and some of these are extremely complicated. But here's one on market manipulation. So this one is hacker makes 360,000 ETH from a flash loan in a single transaction involving Fulcrum, Compound, DYDX, and Uniswap. So How did it happen? Basically, this was something where, okay, someone has analyzed the transaction, which appears to be the one which caused problems. It's some kind of complex single transaction exploit involving a flash loan of 10,000 ETH from DYDX, putting half in compound, half in fulcrum. This is from some Reddit post on it. But this guy says, here's this guy's analysis, or this guy's analysis of the analysis. The attacker used half of the borrowed ETH. So this person took 10,000 ETH out in flash loan from DYDX, used half of it to open a large short on BTC, WBTC on Fulcrum, which is like, I guess it's a platform where you can do like trade derivatives of different crypto assets. So he opened up a short, he bet that the price of BTC would go down, and then he borrowed 100 plus WBTC on Compound and sold it on Uniswap to push down the price. And then he profited from the short on this other platform on Fulcrum, paid back the 10K ETH flash loan to DYDX, and then he got a bunch of profit. So manipulating Uniswap, the price on Uniswap, which was used on Fulcrum for the short position. That's the kind of big picture of how this flash loan worked. The flash loan attack worked. Any questions so far?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, so here's a super complex, ridiculous flash loan attack. I don't actually know what happened, but this is a Cream Finance one. This was I don't know. Okay, I guess October of last year. 130 million lost, and flash loans.
Step.
Yeah, it's a 29. It's just a simple 29-step attack. Flash loans appear all over it, but let's see. Step 5, the guy flash borrows $2 billion in ETH. What else does he do? Any other flash loans? Yeah, I don't see any more. But I guess at the end, he pays back the flash loans, and he keeps the money. So they feature in some extremely, extremely complex attacks as well. All right, what have we got next? Okay. So we're going to go and try to code up our own flash loan exploit. So has anybody written any Solidity code before? Or seen Solidity code?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So we are going to kind of dive in head first here, even though some people haven't written Solidity or looked at Solidity smart contracts. Hopefully we all have experience with programming and should be enough to kind of get the gist of what's going on here. But let's take a look at this. So this is actually from this like DeFi hacking war games site called Damn Vulnerable DeFi. And they have a bunch of, we can actually go look at it. Actually, well, here, since the challenge is here, I'll just read it here. They have a bunch of different challenges and a bunch of different like sample contracts that have a vulnerability somewhere, and you have to figure out how to hack it. So this is challenge number 8. It's called Puppet. And here is the sort of introduction or the setup. So there's a huge lending pool borrowing damn valuable tokens, DVTs, and this is just an ERC20 token, just some token on the Ethereum network, where you first need to deposit twice the borrow amount in ETH as collateral. So the pool currently has 100,000 damn valuable tokens in liquidity. There's a DVT market opened in a Uniswap V1 exchange, currently with 10 ETH and 10 DVT in liquidity. So you, the attacker, start with 25 ETH and 1,000 DVTs in balance, and you must steal all the tokens, from the lending pool. So you need to steal 100,000 DVTs from the lending pool. They offer loans. They're not, they offer loans, and you need to deposit twice the borrow amount in ETH as collateral. So the pool has 100,000 DVTs in it, and that is the setup. So why don't we take a look at this particular exploit? Let me see if I can. Oh, first of all, do you have any questions about the setup?
Looks good.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So actually, so let's see. There are two challenges here. One of them, and I tried to find challenges that kind of mirror some of the exploits that we looked at. So this exploit, actually, when I look at it more closely, this is not a flash loan exploit. This is like this is an exploit that sort of involves manipulating this Uniswap oracle, which is a clue of how it works, but there's no flash loan involved. So that's a hint. This other one here, which is called Selfie, which offers, there's a new lending pool that offers flash loans with DVT tokens. This one does involve a governance flash loan exploit, but we'll warm up with this one, which is sort of a market manipulation exploit here. Let's check it out. Let me share VS Code here. All right. Okay, so here's the contract for this puppet pool. It's not too long, so we'll go through it and we'll see how it works. So first of all, this is a contract in Solidity, and it imports some stuff, and the contract is called Puppet Pool. It inherits from this thing called Reentrancy Guard, which sort of prevents reentrancy attacks. And what do we have here? We have a mapping from addresses to basically UINTs or numbers that tracks the deposits made. These are the deposits of collateral made into this pool. It has the address of the Uniswap pair between DVT tokens and ETH, and it has the address of the deployed like damn valuable token contract. And then here's this is an event. Contracts emit events sometimes when things happen, and that's just that. That's not actually too relevant here. So do you have any questions so far about what's going on in this contract?
Looks good so far.
It looks good so far. So in the constructor, we just initialize the token address and the Uniswap pair address, and we store those in instance variables. And here
what do those up arrows refer to?
Which numbers?
The up arrows.
The up arrows. This is just a handy dandy VS Code extension called Solidity Visual Developer. In this case, it just means that, so this is just a VS Code thing. I think all it means here is that these arrows are arguments to this function. So whenever you use them in the function, you kind of have this visual reminder that you're using an argument. So okay. It's like using an argument that was passed to the function. That's it. Okay, and so here's how the borrow function works. Basically, you can call borrow. Anybody can call it. And you can say, I want to borrow this amount of DVT tokens. And of course, we expect this function to, what is it going to do? It's going to require that you've given at least twice the value of the amount that you want to borrow in ETH, that you've sent that along with this function call. If so, it'll actually go and transfer that money to you. So this is kind of like a collateralized loan in Aave, say, where no matter, you borrow DVT tokens and you have to deposit twice the value of DVT tokens that you want to borrow in ETH. And so then you have the sort of perpetual loan, kind of like on Aave, you repay it whenever you want. So it's not a flash loan. So how does this work? So first of all, it figures out the deposit required by calling calculate deposit required. And it does that by checking how much ETH there is in the Uniswap pair and dividing that by how many DVT tokens are in that Uniswap pair. So it's amount of ETH over amount of DVT tokens. It multiplies that ratio by the amount that you want to borrow, and that's the amount that you need to actually, so it also multiplies that by 2, right? And then that's the amount of ETH that you need to deposit. And then if you've sent along too much ETH, then it'll send back some ETH to you. It will actually increase the amount, it'll sort of increment your amount of deposited collateral, and it'll track that in the contract. Then it'll just try to transfer it, and then that's it. So that's the whole contract. So do you have any questions about how that works?
Looks good.
The question is, it's a question to you guys. How are we going to hack this thing? How are we going to hack this thing? Remember, I as the attacker, or you as the attacker, you have 1,000 DVT tokens. You have 25 ETH. And I think you have 25 ETH. And then there's a Uniswap pair. And of course, the Uniswap pair is sort of the source of truth for the price of a DVT token in terms of ETH here. And the Uniswap pair has 10 ETH and 10 DVT tokens. And the question is, what you have to do is you have to steal all of the DVT tokens inside this pool. And I think there's 100,000 DVT tokens in this pool now. And how do you do that? So anyone have any ideas?
I have an idea.
All right, tell me the idea.
Like basically, in order to get all the tokens out of the lending pool, you want to convince it that they're worthless so that you can borrow a bunch of them. And so in order to make it think it's worthless, you want to manipulate the Uniswap price by selling all of your DVT tokens. I forget the exact name of the token.
Yes.
And then the DVT, because there's so little liquidity in the Uniswap pool, DVT will become basically worthless once you sell all 1,000 of your DVT tokens. And then you can use your ETH to borrow all of the DVT in the pool.
Cole, that is literally how you do it. That is literally completely correct. So we're just going to do that, and it's going to be great. So this is really great. Let's go through the setup, and then let's just do that, and let's all marvel at how that worked. Okay. So if we look at how the setup works, so basically this is like it's like a JavaScript testing environment for this particular Solidity contract public pool here, and we're going to see how to do that. So what we do is, okay, the Uniswap initial token reserve has 10 ETH, right? As we said, Uniswap initial ETH reserve is, its initial token reserve has 10 tokens, but the number of decimals that the token has is the same as ETH. So you can just use this parse ether thing to say 10 plus 18 decimals. Same, there's 10 ETH initially in Uniswap, 1,000 DVT tokens owned by the attacker at first, 25 ETH owned by the attacker at first. This is all old news. We already know about that. And 1,000 DVT tokens inside the pool. So what do? We deploy the Uniswap factory here. This is kind of the setup of the test. Deploy the Uniswap pair here. Deploy the DVT token here. Deploy the Puppet pool here. We actually instantiate these things here. So we have an exchange, we have the token, we have the Uniswap factory. And we just do more setup stuff. So we transfer the initial token reserve to Uniswap, blah, blah, blah. We expect that, we check that things are set up as we expect, and then now we can get to the exploit. Now, if the code in the exploit works, we have these two particular conditions that need to be satisfied. Can anyone tell me what the conditions are?
Yeah, it says there'll be 0 DVT tokens in the lending pool. And
And what's the other one?
And then that the attacker has all of the initial token balance.
Boom, exactly. He has, in fact, more than the initial token balance. So
yes,
we cannot sell all of our tokens to Uniswap and then steal all of the tokens from the pool, because then we'll have an equal amount to the token balance, which doesn't technically meet this requirement. So I guess we'll have to keep that in mind. But let's just run this to make sure that we can't actually exploit it by writing no code. So if we run yarn puppet, we'll run this file. It'll run the non-existent exploit, and it'll kind of revert and say, hey, these conditions are not met, right? So yes, this first one failed. We expected this 100,000 plus 18 decimals to be 0, and that's not the case. The lending pool still is full of DVT tokens. Okay, cool. So what is the big idea here? Can you tell me again?
Yeah, I guess sell 99% of your DVT tokens.
Mm-hmm. And then what?
And then deposit all of your ETH as collateral.
Deposit all ETH as collateral.
And then borrow all of the DVT tokens.
Mm-hmm. And then it's game over, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's just do it. So what's the first step here? So the first step is actually we need to approve the Uniswap exchange to actually like move our tokens around. That's just a technicality here, but let's do it. So we have to say, wait, this.token.connect attacker. So the attacker is basically making this call to the DVT token contract, and he's approving the Uniswap exchange address to move his whole balance around, an attacker initial token balance. Okay, and then, well, we have this thing called, we have to call await this.uniswap exchange dot. Okay, well, the question is, actually, what is like the interface for the Uniswap exchange? It's like a legitimate question. Like, has anyone like interacted with the Uniswap exchange?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we have to literally go look it up on GitHub. So let me share my whole screen and let's do that. So here we go. Okay, so we're just going to say GitHub Uniswap, and I'm not gonna tell you guys what contract to call or what function to call. I mean, you guys just have to look through it and figure it out. But hopefully it's straightforward if the code is well written. So this is Uniswap V1. It was not written in. We can look at contracts. We can look at Uniswap exchange. It's literally just one contract, Uniswap exchange. And what the heck do we do to actually go? Now, notice it's written in Viper, which is not Solidity. So yeah, it's a little tricky, but it's still pretty readable. It looks kind of like Python. What have we got here? So someone has to tell me what function we're going to call in order to swap our DVT tokens for ETH. We have add liquidity. We have remove liquidity. We have get input price, get output price, ETH to token input. There's handy dandy comments here. Pricing function converting between ETH and token. Okay. Convert ETH to tokens, ETH to token input, ETH to token swap input. Okay, ETH to token transfer input, ETH to token output. All right, well, does any of this look good? ETH to token swap output, ETH to token transfer output. What the heck is all this? ETH to token, token to ETH input, token to ETH swap input. We could try all of these all day. Token to ETH transfer input, token to ETH output. Is that all? Is there more? There's a lot more. Token to transfer input. So how are we going to do this? At a high level, what is it that we want to do again with the Uniswap contract?
We want to sell.
Okay, so we want to sell the token and get back ETH. So this one looks pretty good to me. Convert tokens to ETH. Token to ETH swap input. How do you guys feel about that?
All right, looks good.
And then what are the parameters here? Token sold, how many tokens you want to sell? Min ETH is the minimum ETH you want back. So it's like a slippage tolerance kind of thing. And the deadline, which is the time after this transaction can no longer be executed. So if there's like some kind of delay, you need to provide a deadline. So I guess technically we have to provide all that stuff because we are dealing with literally the bytecode of the original Uniswap contract here. So we have to kind of give it what it wants. So let's just do that. So token to ETH swap input, and those are the inputs. Let's give that a shot. Token to ETH swap input. Now, how many tokens do we want to sell is the question.
999.
All right, so let's take this. We'll sell 999. What's the minimum amount of ETH that we want back? We really don't care, right? Let's just say 1.
Yeah.
What's the deadline? Who the heck knows?
We don't care.
Very far in the future. But I guess we could just say 99999. I don't know. Hopefully that'll work.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully that won't break it. All right. And then we need to do what? Deposit all ETH as collateral. Okay.
I think you might have missed, you need to delete a T.
Tethers. Oh, I see. Yeah, good. Nice. Okay, so hopefully that's going to work. Hopefully we've sold 99% of our DVT tokens, and then we want to deposit all ETH as collateral. Actually, it might be worthwhile to just, I noticed that Puppet Pool has this function called calculate deposit required. Why don't we just call it before and after we manipulate the price oracle to see how much the deposit is required for the whole token balance. So if we say this dot lending pool dot calculate deposit required, we'll say this, say let deposit equals this, and then we'll console.log required deposit. Okay, and then let's do it again. This is like before attack or before manipulation. And then here is after manipulation. So before manipulation, what do we expect the required deposit to be? To deposit, to borrow the entire pool token balance.
100,000 ETH or higher.
Yeah, higher, right? Because we're borrowing 100,000 and you need to deposit twice the value, so 200,000 ETH. Because I guess because there's a 1-to-1 ratio between ETH and DVT. So I think we'd expect that to be 200,000 ETH. Let's see, yeah, so hopefully it's 200,000. And then we don't have 200,000 ETH to deposit though. So hopefully after we kind of flood the Uniswap exchange with a bunch of DVT, the required deposit after manipulation is much lower. So we're going to call that function again, calculate deposit required after we've done this manipulation, and we will see what it is. Now, of course, we haven't exploited it yet, but we'll just see if it crashes. All right. Transaction reverted without a reason string. So that's extremely awkward, right? This is one of those issues with like smart contract programming, and however the tools are still pretty nascent. I have a feeling that we pass something bad to this token to ETH swap input. And it reverted without a reason, but we don't know what it is. So that's kind of awkward. Let's try. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering why the 999 uses Parth Ether, but the one does not use it. Like, what's the idea behind using parse Ether?
Well, in this case, so parse Ether just adds 18 zeros behind whatever you want, whatever number you pass it. Yeah. So that converts from like an amount in Ether to amount in Wei, where Wei is 1 over 10 to the 18th power of an Ether.
Yeah.
So what is the awkwardness? Well, let's see. Well, let's see. Maybe we pass something bad for deadline. So let's give it something more reasonable for deadline. Well, right, how do we get the current timestamp, right? So we'll say deadline is, the current timestamp is just date.now, right? But that comes in milliseconds, I think, and so it would be divided by 1,000 to get seconds. We make sure that there's no like fractional part of that. So now that's a current timestamp, and then we'll just multiply it by 2, let's say. Hopefully this will fix our problem. This will be a non-ridiculously large number, or maybe it's too small, who the heck knows, I don't know. Let's see if this actually fixes the problem. So I was thinking that maybe we just give it a bad deadline. Please work. No, it still doesn't work. So what is the issue that we have? Lending pool, calculate deposit required.
I have one idea, which is just for the function which adds 18 zeros, it seems like it returns a big number as opposed to an int, and maybe that's playing with it.
Where is it?
Like if you hover over the parse Ether function.
Right here?
Yeah, it returns a big number type.
Yeah, and I think that it accepts a big number type. In fact, it expects a big number type. Yeah, token to ETH swap input. In this case, it's okay, I think.
Cool.
I think it's okay. I think here's the issue, and it's kind of a stupid thing, but we didn't call. So in order to, let's say, make a function call on the token contract as the attacker, so the attacker is calling this approve function on the token contract, we say token.connect attacker.approve. We didn't actually do that for Uniswap Exchange, which is just a bug. We have to make it so that the attacker is the one calling the token to each swap input. So we would say this.uniswap_exchange.connect attacker. This is just some detail stuff, but I think this is the reason it failed. So it's like, it wasn't clear who was calling it. It was like the deployer was calling it. Some default thing was calling the Uniswap exchange and trying to swap a bunch of tokens that it didn't have to ETH. Does that make sense? So that hopefully is the source of our bug here. Let's run it. Please work. All right. Okay, looks like we got something. Required deposit before manipulation, but it's a big number. We have to actually convert the big number to, we actually have to convert it to like, so I think it's like ethers.parse, or I think it's like format, something like that. I think it's ethers.utils.format ether. And so this will take that big number and convert it to just a regular number that we can see. So this is all the awkwardness of smart contract development right here before your eyes. All right, what have we got? Okay, not bad. Not bad at all. What have we got? So required deposit before manipulation, 200,000. After manipulation, 19 ether. And can we do that? Yes, we can, because we have 25 ETH. So what is the next step? Deposit. And we don't even need to deposit all ETH as collateral. We can just deposit this deposit number of ETH as collateral, because that's literally the amount of collateral required, right? So how do we do that? We'll say await this.lending pool. And we're not gonna forget to call connect attacker now, because we're gonna call this function on the lending pool as the attacker. Dot borrow, and we're gonna borrow literally everything in the pool. So we're gonna borrow literally everything in the pool. And what else does that borrow function take? Does it need anything else? No, this is the borrow amount. Done. Is that it? Are we done? Oh no, we're not done. We also have to pass the ether, right? So in Ethereum, you can call a function, and you can always like attach some ether along with that function call that you're just gonna pass along to the receiving contract, the contract you're calling the function on. How to do that? You pass in some value. In this case, and value here is always is just ether, right? Because this is like the native like currency of the Ethereum blockchain. So value just means ether, and we're going to pass in deposit that amount of ether. Boom. All right. Hopefully we're going to get a green check, and it's going to be over, and this is going to be great. Let's give it a shot. We did it. We literally did it. It's over, guys. So we stole everything.
Rich.
We are rich now. We gave up 20 ETH to get 100,000 DVT tokens. All right, I'm feeling quite good about that.
Awesome.